All right, everybody. I'm here today, fortunate to be joined by three of the artists who were involved with the Roll to the Polls trilogy pieces. First artist that I have is Izzy Moreno. Izzy Moreno was someone that I worked with at the Denver Art Museum when I first got hired on for an exhibition called Star Wars and the Power of Costume, and was a temporary gallery host at the time. I believe she was lead very briefly, but was also very much involved with a bunch of other artistic endeavors outside of the art museum. Is that correct, Izzy?
Sort of. They're more personal projects than anything that held any clout.
Understandable. I mean, I also have personal projects too. If anyone has been following me over the past like 3 or 4 weeks, I've been making a cider, and I guess people like it, but I mean, you know how it is. But Izzy, if you're okay, I'll start you off with the first question.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, sounds good. So your piece seems to be inspired a lot by what I would consider to be like Cubist and like Art Deco influences. I've seen your other work online, and it's a little different from like what you usually do. Were there any artists in particular that you were thinking of when you made this piece?
Um, Not truly, not as far as like cubism is concerned. I was trying to go for a more cubist feel and depart from my normal style. And I do recall channeling Lee Krasner's early work because I know she fell under the Cubist umbrella before taking a departure into abstract expressionism. So then that follows into like Helen Frankenthaler and Judith Goodwin, especially Judith Goodwin's Woman piece, which has a lot of sharp angles. So I was trying to take from a whole bunch of different um, early abstract expressionists, I guess.
Okay. Just as a follow-up to that, I mean, we both work next to a museum of a very famous abstract expressionist that would be considered kind of part of the canon, Clifford Still. Was there any influence at all that you took from him?
Not really, actually. Not intentionally. Um, while I am a fan of some of Clifford Still's work, I was always more focused on female abstract expressionists rather than their male counterparts.
Absolutely. And I think that really lends itself to a show that, I was never involved in because I was about, two or three like cycles removed from it. But the Women of Abstract Expressionism show at the Dam was a show that a lot of folks felt was really empowering because it was a space for a while that, was male dominated, at least from like how it was displayed in art museums. And a lot of people really enjoyed that show. But thank you for your answer, Izzy. I think that's a really good like way to like begin this. Marcus, we're gonna go to you. You ready?
Yes.
All right, sir. So when I asked you to make your poster, I emphasized the fact that I like the portrayal of Silver Age superheroes and science fiction figures. One of the figures that I looked at on your Instagram that really kind of was the big inspiration for your even reaching out to you was your portrayal of Wesley Snipes from the Blade trilogy. Though, I mean, I don't really consider Trinity to be part of that, but that's an editorial comment I might edit out. Uh, did you base the heroes in your poster on any of the figures of Silver Age comic books or science fiction figures?
Somewhat. It's hard to say. Like a lot of those dudes just kind of came out of thin air, with the exception of the wheelchaired superhero. Because when you had initially posed the the initial questions regarding like, well, can you do a superhero poster? Can it be inspired by this and that? I was thinking that you wanted like actual superheroes, and so I was gonna do like a DC Marvel mashup poster. So that character was initially Batgirl, because that was the first wheelchaired superhero that came to mind. And I don't know if Batgirl, wheelchaired Batgirl, which is Oracle, I don't know if she's even in the Silver Age of DC Comics. I also don't really follow the Silver Age DC, but the Flash-esque bicycle riding character was a lot more than probably anyone else. And then the big guy was just sort of, one of your archetypal hulking, muscle-bound figures that kind of, you just throw a guy with muscles and like a skin-tight suit or his arms out, and it can be any era, I guess. So, yeah.
Okie dokie. That's a fantastic answer. I mean, I'll just give a little bit of background as to why I went to Silver Age immediately. When I was growing up, my stepfather, when he married my mom, we came into a relationship very much so by like relating to a lot of old DC comics. My stepfather is into Superman comics, and he is someone that really wants, he was super excited about the Superman-esque figure in the background that, was holding up the bus, because as you know, there's a very early on like Superman issue where he saves I believe a child from a car. And I assume that's your influence from that character to an extent, right?
Yeah, I didn't even think of the fourth character is definitely it's that's a very common scene, right, where you have the super powered muscle bound person and this guy kind of shadowy holding up like a bus or a chunk of a building or what have you. Yeah,
Exactly. Well, that's a great answer, Marcus. Thank you very much for that. And now we're going to move on to Fran. Fran, when I initially we had the conversation about what we were going to talk about and do with the piece, I kind of envisioned something completely different from what I got, but I absolutely love what I got. So one thing that I'll say is your piece seems really personally inspired by things that have happened in your life. Walk me through what the process is of creating it in regards to that personal like touch.
Well, it's funny because when we first talked about it, the first thing that came to my mind was like a magazine cover for some reason. It just came to me. And I think, it can be personal in the sense that I went with what I know, which is like portraits. And I just wanted to do, because I've been working on like Inktober and very linear work and very like, just very fine line work and stuff like that, like working on my ink. And I just wanted to do something different in the sense of using digital rather than traditional, which is my forte. I'm not very good at digital because I don't really use it that much. So yeah, I just wanted to do something like more sketchy, but with a focus on the role, which is the bicycles. Mainly the bicycles, because I think it was in my mind because, you bike everywhere pretty much. And since I helped you translate the Roll to the Poles poster, I kind of had like this whole bicycle thing going on. I actually asked some friends back home to help me out with like the lingo to make it work in Spanish. Because I'm not a bike person. So I know how to bike, but I don't really have a bicycle right now.
If you need help.
Huh? So I have friends back home that are like very, like they even have those suits to go on bike. Those, I don't know how you call them in English. But anyway,
usually the term they use for like bike suits is gear. sometimes there's a few other things that are like slang, but it's just like bike gear for the most part. So
Cool. In Spanish, I mean, I don't know if this is a Spanish thing or a Chilean thing, but it's called tricota, which is a funny little word. But anyway, so I had to get some help from my friends for like the lingo of bicycles because I wasn't super familiar with it. So yeah, all of these things were kind of in my head, and I just started sketching, and this thing came out. And it just reminded me a lot of like, I have a background in fashion design and textile design. So it just kept going back to like this magazine cover. And it just felt, I don't know, I just liked the idea, and I started just like sketching it out and figuring it out as I went. Which I guess is why it feels a little more personal, because it was really kind of like, what do you call it? Like a stream of thoughts, you know, the writing style when you're just like writing whatever comes to your head. It was kind of like that, but with drawing. And I had like a couple different iterations of it. But the one I sent you was the one that finally I liked the most. And it completely passed my mind that she should be wearing a mask probably, because you know, COVID.
It's no big deal. I mean, like, it's not a huge deal, and the fact that you actually are saying it, that you know that's an important thing to you, is a huge deal. Because you know it's something that unfortunately in a lot of countries, including very much the United States, like mask culture is very much just it's so polarizing, unfortunately. But one follow-up question I have, because you did talk about the fact that it is very much based on a fashion magazine cover. The last exhibition that we worked together at the museum before we left was the Dior exhibition. Were there any houses of Dior in particular that you were thinking of when you did the piece, or any particular figures within the strata of Dior at all?
Not Dior specifically. I was thinking more about, like, in terms of magazine, like Vogue, which is like, I don't know, I don't even know even how many issues they have. They've been in our 60s, because they had like a lot of like frontal portraits, and the eyes were in the 60s, you know, like these big eyelashes, and I don't know, very cartoonish kind of style of makeup with Twiggy and models like that. So I think my magazine inspiration went towards that sense, maybe, but not necessarily Dior. I'm not a huge Dior fan, actually. So yeah, I didn't really get inspiration from him.
I mean, that's fair, especially like, I
Definitely
mean, I assume went through the exhibition like 1,000 times. But like, I mean, the various houses of Dior like are definitely like different, and like the original like history of Dior is very fraught with a lot of like just issues that like exist today in like political and social like areas. That's a great answer. So we'll circle back around to you, Izzy. The second question I really wanted to ask you is kind of a more abstract question. And since you are a little further than the urban core than Marcus and Fran, I feel like you would have a little bit more perspective on this. How do you feel that the state of Colorado is doing to make the world more accessible to the people in the piece that you made?
That's kind of a weird answer, because I don't think that they're doing a whole lot, unfortunately. I wish public transportation was more accessible. I wish it looked different, but you know, it doesn't, and that's the whole point in voting, isn't it? Is creating that change. So I think the accessibility starts with early voting and mail-in ballots and all of these almost, I don't want to call them incentives to vote, but it's definitely like a more of an accessible form of getting our voices heard.
Yeah, I mean, as someone that's been kind of an advocate on the edges, particularly with like RTD, I've been, it's the same conversation. Like this is something that, again, I'm speaking as myself and not as the founder of Roll to the Polls in a situation like this, but I advocated with one RTD director. Her name is Chantel Lewis. Fantastic if you ever get the opportunity to learn about her. For fair, free RTD on election day. Because of like issues related to budgeting and the fact that, there's still stigma around public transportation because of COVID-19, rightfully. A lot of the other directors were not on board with this, quote unquote. And there was not really a lot of like push and pull from like the drivers unions as to like whether they supported it or not. So the vote, which like broke my heart, 8 no's, 7 yeses. So literally by the margin of one person, this measure failed. So I completely understand what you're getting at and the importance of like early voting and the importance of being informed. So I'm really happy you said that. Anything you'd like to add in regards to that?
No.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, Marcus, we'll snag you here again. And I mean, this one is a fairly standard question I'd ask pretty much any comic book artist. Growing up, who were your favorite heroes?
I mean, Spider-Man for sure. I feel like I got such an easy question.
No, I'm
Spider-Man.
gonna make this hard for you. What version of Spider-Man?
So, let's talk comics.
Okay.
Marvel, at the time that I was growing up, and into now somewhat, has never been sort of like an accessible sort of thing, like, I mean, yeah, you could just get a comic book, and a lot of my early comic books were just from used bookstores, so it wasn't Marvel or DC. It was a lot of weird horror pulpy stuff. But Marvel and DC have never been really accessible. So when I started reading Spider-Man and really getting into it, it was the ultimate Marvel universe, which was their answer to, how do you get people, a young audience, interested in, these comic books. Like, people don't know where to start with Marvel and DC. You just start with some storyline, but all this other stuff has happened. So like the ultimate Marvel comic books is where I really started reading Spider-Man, and I was like hooked. So Spider-Man, read a lot of manga. So, Naruto and Goku and all those shonen, equivalent to heroes, but, boys that were, coming of age stories in weird, fantastical realms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you probably know, and I wrote a piece about this when Stan Lee passed away, like Spider-Man, the original like Spider-Man, was kind of the amalgamation of 3 creators, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Jack Kirby. And Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby were more of like, oh, we need to create like another Superman to like rival like DC. We need to create this like unrelatable hero that, has these fantastical abilities, but you can never like talk to like a kid that's like 12 or 13 is not going to be like, oh, I can totally relate to a guy that can like destroy a building with like one hand. Whereas like a lot of the original Spider-Man narratives were just like things that he made like in his like bedroom to like emulate like making webs and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the radioactive spider bite was actually like a later thing, correct? Or was that like the original comics?
I don't even know, man. I tried reading the original comics and
okay.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone watching this actually has the answer to that question, please comment below because I do want like a clear answer to this. But thank you for the answer, Marcus. And Yeah, no, one aside, back to my stepdad, he did meet Stan Lee before he passed, and it was just, to me, like seeing that picture, as much as people do have like a lot of issues with like Stan Lee as like a creator in some ways, it's just something that like I'm happy that like he got that opportunity. So, all right, well, circling back to you, Fran, your piece was something that I reached out to you in regards to a thing that you did recently as someone that is from the country of Chile and still eligible to vote in Chile. Uh, you drove 8 hours to vote in basically what is considered to be a constitutional referendum that basically scrapped the I wouldn't say scrapped, but initiated the process of beginning to scrap the constitution put in place by Augusto Pinochet and the regime that was supported by the United States. Uh,
Yeah.
well, the big question, the two questions I have for you is, what was it like driving 8 hours across basically like the middle of nowhere to go vote? And the other question is, you know, your polling place was in Sandy, Utah. What did you like and not like about Utah?
Okay, so I enjoyed road trips. Road trips are fun. I don't know if 8 hours really counts as a road trip because I feel like road trips have like, or the way that I understand them, it's like multiple stops and like a really long, over a long period of time. But whatever the vocabulary related to that, I do enjoy traveling. And the scenery was really nice. Like we did not take the route through Wyoming because apparently Wyoming is terrible in this time of the year and is super windy and icy and very dangerous. So
As someone that has friends from like Laramie that like went to school at University of Wyoming, that's correct.
yeah. Okay, well, we did not go through Wyoming because of those reasons. And yeah, overall, it was a really nice trip. I mean, we drove through the mountains. I took tons of pictures from the car. And it was a really stark difference when we entered Utah. Like suddenly everything was super open and super flat and super desert. And very yellow. Like everything was just very dry and vast, which is beautiful in its own way. I do enjoy scenery like that. I just don't think I could live in that environment. And to be fair, apparently nobody can because everything was very empty. So I don't think anybody lived there. And Salt Lake City and Sandy themselves, I felt they still have a lot of COVID, like a really high transmission, apparently. We saw lots of signs about that. So a lot of things were closed. So I don't think I experienced Sandy or Salt Lake City, for that matter, in the way that you would normally do it as a tourist, because most things were closed. So we couldn't really do anything. And I also felt like, because I was hoping to take at least one day to go to some national park to see the scenery, you know, the beautiful rock formations and the mountains and everything. But in the end, it didn't work because it's such a vast state, and I don't think Salt Lake City is the best place to stay at if you want to do those trips to national parks. It's a little bit far. So by the time I had finished voting, we didn't really have a whole lot of time to get to a national park and then come back to spend the night and then travel back to Denver. But yeah, so it was kind of an adventure in a way, and also an adventure to find the voting place, honestly, because it was a high school in Jordan, Sandy, and it was snowing. I went in the morning around 9 or 10 a.m. I can't remember. So it was snowing. There was nobody around. I could, like, Channing and I were thinking, like, this is freaking Silent Hill. Like, where is everybody? Nobody around. Nobody on the streets. Nothing. we get to the school. Obviously, it's closed, so there's no cars around or anything. We drove around the school for like, I don't know, like 4 times trying to figure out which one was the main entrance. There were no signs whatsoever like, hey, Chilean referendum this way, nothing, no flags, nothing. So I fear that a lot of Chileans that might have gone there, maybe they didn't find the place because honestly, it was really hard. Finally, we found the main entrance because there were some like American flags and stuff like, okay, yeah, this looks like a main entrance. I push the door, it's open, all good. I go inside, big Chilean flag and an arrow towards where the voting was. And it said like line starts here. There was nobody. There was nobody around, no line, nothing. I go in, I cast my vote, they check my ID, they checked everything. And they all looked pretty bored, honestly. I hope, I'm pretty sure more people went in and voted. I was the 11th person that day.
As
and-
someone that like, you know, is very big into video games and like mobile games and stuff, did you recommend any games to them at all to like help them not be bored?
Not really. It was, you know, it was one of those things that you just go in, you cast your vote and you leave. They were like, this was like in a gymnasium or something. And yeah, there's apparently 207 Chileans registered in this electoral region, or I don't know how you call it, circumscription, we call them in Spanish. So hopefully more than 11 went to vote that day, but they weren't a lot. I mean, 200 is not a whole lot of people. But yeah, so it was quite an adventure, and it definitely kind of felt like a video game because honestly, it was so hard to
That's
even find
fair.
the place.
That's fair.
The only thing I recommended to them was like, hey, can you please put a sign like outside, because there's no way of knowing where I'm supposed to go vote.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, like a sign would even just be like fine. Like, I mean,
Just
the thing that I enjoy, and you know, this is a little aside, like about the state of Colorado, is like the ballot drops are fairly like, you know, they got several signs. They have things that like are pretty like good about like saying, oh, you can't be electioneering or like doing some crazy dumb shit near a voting booth.
Mhm.
Though, I mean, yes, yeah, a couple nights ago, I dressed up as a Ghostbuster and told people to go
Yes.
vote. So, if none of you have seen that clip yet, it's something that is probably one of the more dumb things I've done in my life. But I mean, I relate to both Venkman and Egon a lot as like characters who are played by Bill Murray and the late Harold Ramis, respectively. I agree that it should be very accessible. Though I will add a comment. The Chilean flag looks very much like the Texas flag. So like I would be worried that like you would get a bunch of Texans just like trying to vote like for like stuff.
It is
yeah,
almost identical. Yeah.
Yeah, but and we could talk about that a little bit later, but I don't want to get too like down the rabbit hole. Izzy, we're gonna go back to you in regards to questions. So as you know, we both worked at the Denver Art Museum roughly between, I would say, what was it, 2016 to 2017, correct?
Yeah, I was there for about a year, so I did work Women of Abstract Expressionism, and then I left towards the end of Star Wars.
Okay.
Yeah, so I believe that was 2017 when I left.
Okay, so I guess take your mind back to 2017. Take your mind back to working the floors of the Denver Art Museum. And you can also answer multiple floors because there are also multiple buildings. What was your favorite floor to work in the Denver Art Museum as a gallery host between both of the buildings, and why?
My favorite floor was the 4th floor of the North Building, or what was the North Building.
Martin,
I
but
know
I
that-
mean, you know, it's donors, whatever. I mean, I'm here as a private citizen, not associated with the museum, and I'll criticize the Martins however I want.
Um, well, the fourth floor was the aptly named Spanish colonial section and Mesoamerican art, which made me feel like I was being surrounded by my culture and by my ancestors. I really felt a really big spiritual pull from that, because my dad is from Panama. I'm a first generation American, and I was raised by not my dad, but by a white woman. So I never really got to experience my ancestry the way that I know other people have. So the fourth floor was this really really enlightening and comforting place for me to be in, just to see what my ancestors did. I have ancestry on both the Aztec side and the Spaniard side. So kind of seeing the kind of blood war between the two arts as well is really interesting to me too.
Do you mind if I make a comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I actually had issues with the fourth floor from, for me, a historical perspective. It felt really weird juxtaposing, a lot of folks who were the conquerors and the conquered next to each other. I thought it was well done, but there were always like times where, there was that grace period at the end of the night where you wait for like everyone to leave and be gone so that, you don't see like anything crazy happen, where I would just kind of sit on, I think it was like a bench that was kind of between the galleries. And I always just it felt off because you're between these two like completely opposed cultures in a lot of ways. But I definitely see your point about, when it comes to like things like that. And I never like had that like identity that I could really wrestle with. So just because I imagine it's going to come up, I was the gallery host at the Denver Art Museum roughly from 2016 to 2017. I switched over to the security, which has a more front end line to it. And but you can also go and talk a lot about like security in the context of like things like Black Lives Matter and policing as well, if anyone is interested in that. But yeah, my favorite floor when I worked as a gallery host was always the Asian art floor. There was a standing piece where there was a mandala that was made actually, I believe, offsite, but transferred on-site to the museum, that has a video of it that I think it's in storage right now, but they do have a replica mandala on the fourth floor of the Hamilton building. But it was just something that was cool to see, like the process of it. And like for me, I mean, I would say that I'm not a particularly religious person, but like the concept of like rebuilding yourself constantly and being destroyed, for me, there's a beauty to it. And that's why I really enjoy the fifth floor a lot. All right, well, kind of circling back around to Marcus. All right, so this question was originally just like, the stereotypical, like, DC versus Marvel, but I also want to talk about like other comic imprints that we've talked about, like, beyond just this, because we've had past conversations about Image. What is your favorite like major like comic publishing organization right now, and why?
I mean, it's probably still Image, you know what I mean? I haven't been able to read. I mean, I guess I still read a lot of comics. I just don't read as much as I used to. I mean, back when I worked at the museum, I was able to work a lot of what's it called, access, and that's when I was really going through a bunch of
Yeah.
Image comics, because
and my
we could read and
apologies.
stuff.
Yeah, my apologies. We I kind of back up because like a lot of like people like listening at home don't necessarily know what Image Comics is in relation to DC and Marvel. Could you explain for them really briefly what Image is and kind of why it exists?
Um, so, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, it is just another comic imprint, but it's more so for, I mean, I would call them indie comics, but they end up being probably some of the most popular comics now. You know, if you look at a lot of the comic awards, I mean, a good portion of them end up going to people who work with Image, just because Image, for one, doesn't, you know, exist within a one shared universe. It's just like, if you have an idea as a writer or an artist, you can pitch it to Image Comics, and then Image Comics will decide whether or not they want to, you know, make it, print it, and then send it to comic book stores all over. And a lot of my inspiration, like other illustrators, tend to be Image comic writers and artists, just because, you know, Marvel and DC are very hard to sort of end up working with in a lot of ways. And, you know, it's just easier to kind of like make your own universe and then have it made through Image and published through Image. And
Yeah.
Image does a good job at, you know, supporting artists and writers. And I believe the Image creators also make a lot more from their comic books than like a Marvel or a DC artist would, just for each per issue sold. And because of that, it just sort of inspires a lot of really good work that comes out. For one, people aren't trying to write stories about already established characters. There's really creative freedom in all aspects, and they just come up with.
Marcus, you're cutting in and out a little bit. How are you doing over there? Marcus? My internet. Can any of you guys hear me?
Can hear you
if you
now.
can hear me, thumbs up. Okay. Cool. Okay, Marcus. So you kind of cut out. I believe you were talking roughly kind of about like, and correct me if I'm wrong. Kind of the fact that like artists can create their own like shared universes within the Image world. And I mean, to me, obviously, the Image comic that everyone like talks about is Walking Dead. So that's one of those that like I read, and I had no idea it was Image until I like looked at the spine and was like, oh, well. And what do you think about like, you know, that concept of like you don't have to make like a Spider-Man that's like kind of cooler because like he's got like claws or something?
You know, with Image, it's an interesting thing, because with Image's competition, Marvel and DC, a lot of these characters are characters that you continue to see, you know, over and over again, for several generations. With Image, it's, you know, it's completely new stuff, you know, and more, and I would even say that there are even a lot of superhero comics. You know, like Walking Dead really isn't a superhero comic. It's, you know, a zombie, consider it superhero. And Saga and Black Science and a lot of other, you know, big names. I think initially Image had sort of started out with more superhero-esque comics like Savage Dragon, and but
Yeah.
gone past that, and there's lots of you know, crime fighting or detective or love stories or space opera type, you know,
Yeah.
things. It's very varied. And also
Yeah.
the creators, the artists and the writers are a lot more diverse on the Image side than what you would find with Marvel or DC, you know.
Yeah, and from my understanding, Image was started by a lot of disaffected like artists from Marvel in particular. which is why a lot of those narratives exist. Because I mean, initially you'll get the superhero thing because that's what they know, but when you get to a place where you're like, I'm mad at Marvel and I want to make like something totally different, that's where you get those creative stories. Is that what you they would think?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, with Marvel and DC, you don't really see very many comics in their, in their collection of comics that are not the main stories that you continue to hear. It's not just another spin on a Batman storyline. It's something completely original, and that's really why raise and create memorable characters that are new. And it's also something to be said that you can have major characters of color that come up in image that aren't just sort of rehashed new envisioned superheroes, because you see it with Marvel and DC that there's always like these pushes for inclusion, so they'll switch a main character storyline so that it's this person is now black and is an inner city youth, and while those guys are really like memorable, like Miles Morales. Or
I was literally like about to say that's why I asked like what your favorite Spider-Man was, because there's so many different Spider-Mans. But go ahead. My apologies for interrupting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with the Peter Parker Spider-Man, and I love Miles Morales Spider-Man, and I all superheroes of color. But I also really believe in the idea of not just having a new identity for an already established hero, but creating an entirely new storyline for a person of color. I think that's more sort of important than just sort of throwing a new skin on a superhero.
Okie doke. Well, that's a fantastic answer. So going back to Fran really quickly. We talked a little bit about it in the first question about like how it was very much inspired by a Vogue cover. Do you have any like individual Vogue artists that you drew inspiration from in making the piece, or any eras of Vogue in particular that you would say that you had in making the piece?
I don't really know any specific artists that worked for Vogue, honestly. I just remember like what the covers looked like and how they felt attractive to me because of the angle, because of the light, because of the makeup or the hair or whatever else it was. I've always liked a more cartoony style, or very stylized, I would say. So that kind of drew my attention. I can name a couple of artists that I really admire that have inspired me to kind of get back to drawing after many years of not doing anything.
Do that.
And that is, one of them is, he's Brazilian. His name is Renato Fatini. I can type out the name for you. And
I actually think I think I know Satini, which is, but type out the name, please.
Okay. And his Instagram, I'll also type it out. His Instagram is simply Renato Facchini. And he also has a website. He's amazing. He's an amazing artist. He's also worked on video games. And he's just a fantastic illustrator. He's a great inspiration and a very, very dear friend. Another great artist that I draw a lot of inspiration from, no pun intended, is Loish. I actually don't know her like real name, but her Instagram account is Loish, Loish. And I've been following her since, I don't know, maybe 10 or more years ago. She's absolutely fantastic. She's amazing. She actually had a campaign for Black Lives Matter when everything exploded with the death of George Floyd. So she drew a bunch of prints that were sold on her website, and 100% of the of the proceedings went to the Black Lives Matter movement. So she's very much, she's in Amsterdam, like she's not even from the States, but she's Dutch. But it's really remarkable that she would care so much, and actually not that surprising because the Netherlands has a history of racism as well. So I can imagine that she has probably like personally experienced that herself over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those two are the main ones. I could name more, but those two are like my beacons of inspiration.
And I mean, speaking to racism in other countries, I actually was out this morning after a press conference, and I rode my bike over to a brewery called Black Sky, which is over on 6th and Santa Fe here in Denver. The guy that was serving me the beer that I got, which is it's kind of like a summer beer. So in about like 2 or 3 weeks, it won't matter if I make this recommendation. But I'll try and I think it was something pedal. And if he's watching this right now, I'm sorry that I forgot the beer I bought from you, sir. But we got into a discussion about Swedish punk from the 70s and the 80s. And one of the big issues in Sweden around that time was like immigration. And unfortunately, like the biggest issue that he had was, I like this kind of music, but they say really racist things in this music. It's funny because the reason we were talking about it is because I have a neighbor from high school that was in a Swedish punk band in the 70s and the 80s called Troikne. And he came to America in the 80s. And I got him on the phone actually between my server being like, doing serving other tables. And I got a bunch of like recommendations from him because like he moved to America and he's significantly more like liberal minded when it comes to things like immigration. So I'll link some of his stuff, once this call's over. And I'm also looking at the time right now. It's about 7:44. I don't want to keep you guys for too much longer. We have about two questions between all three of you. And B, the time, I'm looking at the Zoom meeting time, and we may need to extend it a little bit. Would you guys be willing to stay for about 30 more minutes to continue this conversation? And then B, yeah, thumbs up. And then B, I need to figure out how this works Zoom-wise, if I can just extend it while the meeting is running. So do you guys mind going on mute for just a second to, and I'll go on mute as well to figure this out? Fran, I know you're saying words, but like, I don't know if you're like trying to talk to me. My bad. Okay. No, yeah, you're on mute still. So, are you trying to like signal like how to make this work? I mean, this is part of the recording and
No.
we're probably, oh, what? My bad.
No,
I'm trying to figure this out. I think what I'll end up doing, if you guys are all cool with it, is this will be part one, I guess, of this thing. And what we'll end up doing is I'll create another Zoom meeting for about 7:47, which will probably be about the time that it takes for me to make the meeting, do all that stuff. And then what we'll do is we'll cut these both, trim them together, and put the best parts in. It's kind of like making a hot dog. This is a hot dog of, a discussion. So if you guys mind just all hopping off, I'll create another meeting and then we'll start with questions 4 and 5. You good? Cool. All right. See you in a second.
Hello.
Alrighty, everyone. Well, welcome back to
Hello.
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you, Marcus. Izzy, all right, I can hear you.
Yay.
All right, and then all right. Let me double check that this is being recording, and it is recording. So I hear you, Izzy. I see your image, Marcus. No pun intended, based on our earlier discussion. And Fran is up now. So after a very
Good one.
after
That was a good one.
I know. All right, after a very seamless process of transitioning from part one to part two, that did not require any weirdness or any jokes at all in our group text. We're going to continue this discussion because, you know, you guys are excited. I'm excited. This is fun. I'm enjoying myself. I mean, I personally, if I didn't have to go to work at 11 o'clock, I would just continue the hell out of this. But alrighty, so we ended on Fran's comment in regards to the inspiration for her piece and whether it was something related to a specific Vogue cover. So we're gonna come back to Izzy on this. So Izzy, I don't know how much you ride your bike. I don't know if like it's a mode that you use at all. So I'm not gonna, you know, assume that you ride your bike, but is there anyone in the piece that you made that you can relate to in any way?
Fun fact, I haven't owned a bike since 2015.
I don't hold it against you.
Thank you. Perfect. Awesome. I don't relate to anyone in my piece, and that was part of the point. I wanted something that didn't have what could be construed as generic white girl on a poster. We see that a lot. I wanted to take a departure. I wanted to feature people who we might not see, with body types that are a little bit, you know, more different than what we see in everything nowadays.
And I'm gonna actually, if I may comment, when you think of like a cyclist, but I don't like the word cyclist, but I'll get to that in a different part of this discussion if we get to that. When you see people riding their bikes outside, most people assume they look like me, or like someone thinner than me, because it's usually the white male that, you know, has a certain amount of money and a certain amount of comfort in his life that he's able to ride his bike as either an option for commuting because he lives in a place that has a lot of bike infrastructure, or it's somebody that's a hobbyist that like buys like a $2,000 bike and just, you know, completely goes like nuts and does like these crazy ass runs across like various parts of the city. I agree that more people of color, more women should be represented in like bike advocacy, bike literature, and just bike pieces in general. But go ahead with your point.
Oh, I was thinking about who I haven't seen on a bike and what kind of weird bikes that we don't really get to see. And in case anyone owns like a big old tiny bike with a giant front wheel and a tiny back wheel, I want to see that. Like, I want
Penny
to see
farthing,
that
but yeah,
someday.
go ahead. It's got a specific name. It's called a penny farthing, but yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I didn't know that.
Fun fact. But yeah, go ahead.
I actually started with the woman in the hijab, worked my way to the Asian man on the penny farthing, and then worked my way forward as I went, just to try to make as many different characters as I could. And
Yeah,
the result is what it is.
that's awesome. And I mean, I agree. Like, I mean, I am kind of a critic of, I'll even say it, I'm a critic of the bike advocacy community here in Denver. When I went to our first meeting, like that we had when Denver Bike Lobby kind of separated from Bicycle Colorado as a whole, We went to a place kind of up near like Lohi-ish area, which if you're not in Denver, Lohi is kind of by where Union Station is. But I would say maybe a mile or so out, called Recess, which is like kind of an open brewery. It's a cool little patio. But I mean, my skin tone, my color hair, and I'm not going to assume, but the things that I have like underneath this package were pretty much like 90% of the people in that meeting. Uh, and I don't like that. I like it when it's not a situation that, you know, you have like people that are riding bikes in neighborhoods like North Side in Denver, or people that are riding bikes in well, where I live, not where I'm streaming because I'm in the midst of like Baker right now, but basically west of I-25, it's like Narnia in like bike land, and it's kind of scary in a lot of ways. So Narnia is probably not a good comparison because Narnia is a really nice place. Let's go with the universe created in Pan's Labyrinth. It's like that place. Yeah, I agree that, you know, more people of color and more people from, you know, underserved communities should be represented in bike advocacy, because usually what happens is you get like neighborhoods that have like 2 or 3 different bike facilities and wide sidewalks in central Denver, but then you go to a place like in the west side and like half sidewalks, like long streets for cars. Uh,
Yep.
but yeah, do you have anything to kind of add to the that question or that I guess comment?
No, I mean, I've lived on both the west side of Denver and the east side of Denver, and the south side of Denver, and I can tell you that the streets are long and narrow and not super accessible for cyclists of
Yeah.
any race, gender, age.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah,
no,
and
nail on the head.
you have a lot more lived experience because I moved to Denver in 2016. Well, I moved to Colorado, I guess. Denver technically in 2017, 2018. So, you know, it's good to like hear that conversation because there's one other man that's lived in Denver for a long time that at least Marcus will know. Izzy, you might know him. His name's Mike Sami. But Mike Sami would ride his bike into work every fucking night. And like he is kind of my inspiration because he bought like a beater $20 like dollar bike. And he said, yeah, I started riding back in like the 90s. Like, and this is before we had these conversations about like accessibility and about like things like that. And I mean, the Cherry Creek Trail and some of the bigger like bike facilities still existed, but like we couldn't have these nuanced conversations because Mike was like, yeah, it was terrifying as hell. Like, because I was like one of the few guys on the road, like during like the winter. But oh man, I miss Mike. He retired recently. If for anyone that is listening at home, Michael Sami was a security supervisor for the Denver Art Museum, roughly from the early 2000s to July of 2020. He retired and is moved to a place in rural Colorado near Buena Vista or Buena Vista called Hartselle, which is I've been down there. I helped him move a safe. It's basically like a beautiful pastoral like part of Colorado that's a little higher up, I would say, than BV or Buena Vista or Buena. People say Buena Vista out here, and it's really weird because I grew up in Southern California where Buena is like a thing.
It's
I
Buena.
don't, but some people say Buny too, which is like weird as hell. I mean, it's like I grew up in like a city named Oxnard, and some people call it the Nard. They call our genre of music Nardcore, and there is a strong Nardcore scene. And we have a huge group text going, and Fran's texting frantically in that group text, and all of these references we should like text to each other and like put in some sort of gigantic Google document. But yeah. Alrighty, well, moving on to Marcus after that little aside into Nardcore stuff. I hope we didn't like, like completely like isolate you. Let me grab your questions really quickly. I actually do know this question off the top of my head. So one of the biggest things is we talk about the greats when we talk about comic illustration. We talk about the, Jack Kirby's. We talk about the Stan Lee's. We talk about, Bob Kane, obviously, when it comes to Batman. But who are some artists today that you really like? And like artists that you would say that you think more people should know about?
As in, like, living artists?
I would say, well, a mix of living and a mix of dead too, because again, I was, rapidly naming off a bunch of like names that people in the comics world would know. But if there is like an artist that has passed that you feel like got screwed, didn't get their comeuppance, name them.
I mean, maybe I'll stick with illustrators, but in terms of artists that more people should know, and there's this guy Jean Girard. He died, I think, in 2011 or 12 or something like that. Jean Girard, aka Mobius, kind of helped establish the sort of cyberpunk science fiction aesthetic that the 80s is pretty known for, kind of grungy film grain. He worked on stuff like The Fifth Element, Jodorowsky's, and I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but his Dune, The Final Incal, helped start Metal Hurlant that later became Heavy Metal, which is the big pulp science fiction that almost all science fiction sort of like kind of goes back to without many people really realizing that it does. So definitely Mobius, because Mobius is essentially the sort of grandfather of most of the modern illustrators that I look up to now. Notably, Ronald Wimberly. Ronald Wimberly does a lot of sort of political comics these days, and is like a traditionally trained French, like, he's trained in France for illustration, but he's an African American from the US. He's just been all around, and that's part of the reason why he's the first that I say after Mobius, because he was one of the guys that I would follow on DeviantArt way back in the day when DeviantArt was like, yo, if you're making art, go to DeviantArt, share it. And I went, and that's where I got a lot of early inspiration from, which was from Ronald Wimberly. Another artist who's more of an animator is LaShawn Thomas, who grew up in Brooklyn, and he never went to school, never went to college or trained. He just taught himself how to draw, and he worked on the Boondocks, Black Dynamite, Avatar, Legend of Korra. LaShawn Thomas is dope because he's also got a foot in everything, and so much so that, in Brooklyn, he wanted to learn how to animate. He wanted to animate shows. And when he finally got a job in animation, he wasn't doing like the frame by frame animation. At that point, it had all gone to South Korea. Even stuff like King of the Hill, or, just everything, not non like anime. It was all being done in South Korea. So LaShawn Thomas actually went to South Korea for a long time, and did animation for big animation studios, working on Legend of Korra and pretty much everything else. Like he's big on Netflix now because he's sort of supervised a lot of the anime coming out of Netflix these days. And he's just like a really cool guy because he's self-trained and also speaks a lot about just his experience being an African American in South Korea trying to break into the animation business. Who else? Richie Pope. Richie Pope lives in California, does illustrations for The New Yorker, and other publications of that. I think he works on Craig of the Creek right now for Cartoon Network as background sort of thing. So these guys, yeah, those are top 4 right now. Those are the guys that I go back to, or whose pages I always have up when working on other illustrations to see like how they color stuff, or, you know, what sort of line economy they're dealing with. Because like some of those guys, I also did not go to college and learn how to draw. I did like a year of college and then not even really art classes and stuff. I just sort of have always drawn, and that sort. So I'm, you know, they're the big inspirations to me.
That's wonderful, Marcus. And a couple of points that I'd like to make and things that I'd like to add as well. So I clapped a lot when, like, you talked about heavy metal and Mobius, because heavy metal was one of the first like exposures that I have had to animation that was like an adult thing in my life. And I own, I think, 2 copies of the heavy metal vinyl because I accidentally bought another copy. And I mean, of course, I own like the DVD. Of course, I own like a bunch of like that stuff, but it's interesting because the heavy metal soundtrack is a weird mix of just music too, because to kind of like contextualize this for viewers at home, so that I'm not going way too far down a rabbit hole, heavy metal was a animated kind of cyberpunky movie in the 80s that was mainly based off of just a bunch of like narratives and like the songs from like really like contemporary artists of that time period. So you're thinking like Judas Priest, you're thinking like Dio, you're thinking like stuff like that. But the soundtrack itself is really well curated to the film that it makes, which is why, you know, even though like I would say my biggest like and favorite form of music is industrial, which we'll get to later. I will say that like heavy metal was definitely a formative part of my life. And speaking of industrial, let's go back to Fran, but we're not going to talk about that yet. Fran, and one of the things that Marcus touched on in his talk about various artists and like their struggles in kind of getting through in different parts of the country really kind of relates to something that I wanted to bring up back when we were talking about the polling place in Utah. So a big drama that we're dealing with in this election is a weird mix of this like voter suppression that has just, I would say, it's a mix of things that have amalgamated over the years. The one thing that it has been like big is, I mean, it didn't really start, I would say, until the 2010s with like the rise of like the Senate majority of Mitch McConnell, and also the Republicans taking over the House of Representatives when they got to control redistricting, which gerrymandered the hell out of the House until 2018. But from your point of view, Fran, as someone that voted and had to drive 8 hours to vote in a gymnasium that had no clear markings, what forms of voter suppression have you seen in regards to both this referendum? And then I also want to go back to 2018 with the election of Piñera. And what did you see in regards to that? I guess just take it from there.
Well, there was actually a few reports from other parts of the country, and generally for Chileans across the globe to vote. Like a lot of reports of possibly voter suppression. One of the big ones was in Vancouver, actually, in Canada. People were lining up for up to 3 hours to vote, and the embassy or the consulate, wherever it was that they were voting at, they didn't make any accommodations for the day itself. So people were literally freezing outside, waiting to go inside to cast their ballot. And this was true in Vancouver, this was true in LA and New York. And well, in Utah, there was nobody there because there's, again, like 200 people registered living between Denver, Colorado, Utah, probably Wyoming, and, New Mexico, maybe, I don't know. So not a lot going on here. But at the same time, there were hardly any signs. It was also snowing. There was plenty of room to make a line inside. So freezing to death wouldn't have been a problem. But yeah, there were lots of reports of people just like literally calling in to ask for more blankets or something to wear because they had to wait for 3 hours in like minus Celsius temperatures.
But which in Fahrenheit would be
warm.
fairly low as well. So
yeah. So that's definitely something. And the fact that the consulate themselves or the officials that were managing the voting places, they didn't really care and they didn't do anything to improve the situation. Like at least, I don't know, go outside and handle some tea or something warm to drink while you wait. I don't know, something, you would expect something. And another big thing has been COVID. Nobody that had been diagnosed with COVID could go to vote. Like presently in Chile, they did not enable electronic voting or mail-in voting. So you had to physically go to a place, which meant that if you were in quarantine because you had been in touch with someone or many people with COVID, you couldn't go to vote. If you had been diagnosed with COVID, you couldn't go to vote. And if you were in recovery of COVID, you had to have like a little recovery card indicating that you no longer have the virus, and then you might go to vote. So it was like a lot of things together placed in by the government that could lead to a whole lot of voter suppression for sure. And even so, it was 7.5 million Chileans just in Chile voting for the new constitution. So they just couldn't stop us. This thing has been going on for decades. We've been peacefully protesting for decades and nothing has happened. So the explosion, as we call it, in past October, that was like just the tip of the iceberg, like the drop that just filled the glass, and there was a lot of resignation when Piñera got elected. Hardly anyone voted in that election. They had recently made voting voluntary, so it wasn't before Piñera's election. Before that year, it was mandatory to go to vote. Like you had to go to vote. If you didn't want to vote, you could vote null or vote for whoever you knew that it wasn't going to win, but you had to go to vote. And for that particular election, they decided to make it voluntary. And people just didn't go to vote. And honestly, and that's why Piñera got elected. He literally won by like 52% of the votes, but less than half of Chileans actually voted at all. So of course, it was kind of like 50-50 to either candidate to win at that point. And so, honestly, I don't blame them for not going to vote because we have been living in this weird system where we're constantly voting for the less of two evils. And people are just so resigned to nothing changing and nothing improving that they just didn't feel like their vote would make a difference. And I think that was the main difference with the voting this year for the referendum, because people felt like they could really make a change. And we did. But back in 2017, that was not the general spirit of the Chilean people. And yeah, Piñera got elected because reasons.
So. Can I interject and talk about an election in the United States that's very similar to that? So in 1999, 2000, two candidates, well, there were, I could probably talk and go way deep in the weeds on this one. But George W. Bush ran against Albert Begor, and that was another election where there were a ton of issues like happening at the time, but it was mostly domestic things. Like Bill Clinton was a fairly popular president post impeachment because of the fact that, you know, a lot of people thought, you know, there was a lot of moral panic on the Republican side in regards to impeachment, though I will say there is a little bit of like ambiguity in the conversation that we can have about Monica Lewinsky and how I would say exploitative that Bill Clinton was in regards to that thing. But Bill Clinton was fairly popular. Al Gore was his vice president. George W. Bush was a governor from Texas that had gotten elected in a wave year for Republicans, where he bested Ann Richards, who was like a fairly progressive Southern Texan governor. So going in, Bush and Gore were fairly evenly polled, but there was an issue that, you know, they were involved in legacy politics in the United States, where George W. Bush was the son of H.W. Bush, who was president from 88 to 92, and was the vice president of Ronald Reagan from 1980 to 1988. So he had that. Al Gore was vice president under Clinton, but also, you know, there were, he had been a senator from the state of Tennessee for years as well, and was considered to be very much like in the mold of Bill Clinton and like the movement to the right that the Democrats like did very much in the 90s. So for a lot of people that like saw these two candidates, they were just like, there's no voice for a left in the United States. There's no voice for like any sort of like, you know, thing that could exist outside of these two candidates. And that's when, and I actually have this out of frame, so I'm going to use this as a visual aid, but bands like Rage Against the Machine, that's when you see bands like that, like it's super popular. And that's when you see albums like The Fragile by 9 Inch Nails like come out and like have these like political like messages and like things of that nature. And I mean, Year Zero comes out like 7 years later and also has like very much like capital G's about George W. Bush. But this election, and let's flash forward to election night, like November 2000, so I don't keep you guys until like 3 a.m. But Florida was kind of our like situation where it was the 52% favor of Piñera. And Bush won that state by 537 votes. And unlike Chile, where I assume it's popular vote, you know, the United States has something called the Electoral College, where if Florida had, if like you had about 1,000 votes or even 600 votes that went the other way, it would have gone to Gore. But two things were at play. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was governor of Florida as well. So a lot of the voter restrictions that came into place during that time were caused by Jeb, who would run, you know, 16 years later in the Republican primary and not really pick up any steam. The other thing was the Supreme Court was kind of balanced in a way where in the United States, our Supreme Court has generally stuck to about 9 justices, except for a period of time in the 1940s when FDR tried to pack the court. But the justices since about the 70s and the 80s have become more rigidly ideological. And the court was, I would say, about 4 liberal, quote unquote, justices, 4 conservative-ish justices, and then Sandra Day O'Connor, who was a Reagan appointee, but also had like some fairly independent like ideas when it came to like women's issues. The court ruled 5-4 in regards to stopping a recount of Florida because a recount was triggered under a certain amount of like margin. And the recount stopping favored President, or, you know, well, then Governor Bush, and then became President-elect Bush at that time. And President-elect Bush, as we know, like in the past 8 years, at least, you know, United States citizens, President Bush presided over a period of, you know, getting entangled in the Middle East, a period of the enhancement of the security state, period that like he made a bunch of decisions that affected people. Like if you ever go to an airport, that is something that is a Bush era thing. If you are having a conversation and you have a feeling you're being watched, or if you have a webcam out of frame, the Patriot Act is basically the grandfather of a lot of like modern mass digital surveillance. But he won by 537 votes, which that's I mean maybe 2 or 3 times the amount of like Chileans that are known in like the Salt Lake or Utah and Colorado area. And it's just crazy that we live in a system where we have a president that got a minority of the popular vote, actually, technically, because Gore got more votes. But Bush had a lasting impact on American politics and appointed 2 Supreme Court justices, whereas Trump has, and I hate to talk too much about this, appointed 3. So a majority of the Supreme Court justices, that have been appointed over the past 20 years have been appointed by presidents that have gotten a minority of the vote. So they basically get to rig their own elections to an extent. And that's just something that I think is wrong. And I imagine you all would think that is wrong as well, right? Okay. So yeah, I know this has gone on a little bit of a tangent about like my political science like degree, but let's move on back to Izzy. Sound effects. All right. So we're actually on to the lightning round. This is the last question of the night for you, Izzy. Do you have any other projects that you're working on right now, or any projects of other artists that you would like to highlight at this point in time?
I have a bunch of personal projects going on. I'm a woman of 10,000 projects all the time. I don't know how I'm gonna finish any of them, to be honest. But I don't have anything going right now that I have planned for like the public eye. I am focusing on some non-art related projects. Namely, I'm trying to start a tarot card reading business, because that's something I'm hugely passionate about, and I love it. So that's been mostly my focus. And also I've had a very sleepy kitty on my lap the entire time. She unfortunately Hi. She unfortunately has cancer, so.
Okay, no, I know we've talked about Phoebe, but if you want to, I don't know if you're still doing the GoFundMe, but if you want to talk about that, that'd be great too.
The GoFundMe, I believe, still has about a week left, to reach our goal of $1,000. We're halfway there, at least. So I'll send you like the link for it.
And I'll when I post this video, I'll post that at the I'll post all of your side projects at the top too, because I mean we can have this like hours long conversation about all of these artists, all of these things that we've talked about. But at the end of the day, it's about what's happening now and where we're at today. And I think all 3 of you would agree with me in that regards. And we should be focusing on issues that are going on right now. So I will post a link to Phoebe. And then for the tarot card reading business, can you also, whenever that comes off the ground, can you just send that to me and I'll also promote that?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I will. Definitely. I'm working on the website right now, so that'll be up and running shortly, I hope.
Okie doke. And same question to Marcus as well. Are there any projects that you are personally excited about? And it sounds like you're not promoting any other artists on this feed, so that's fine. That's totally cool. Even though it seems like you have a fairly good, like, root with the art community.
Yeah,
Are there any other authors besides this poster that you want to promote for yourself?
I'm just gonna promote for myself. Well, actually, no. I will second the Phoebe GoFundMe because that cat is adorable. And yeah, first block. Second block, I don't know. I guess I commissions are open for me, but not really. I got a lot of commissions already.
There.
And then thirdly, I have a Patreon, which is like a sticker subscription, a monthly sticker subscription, so that you can link that.
I will link your Patreon. Patreon. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an artist. I'm just a guy that's like good with words and like talking to people. I would hope. We're seconding Phoebe, obviously. I mean, and I assume we're going to be thirding Phoebe once Fran pipes in on this conversation. But I also do want to talk to Fran about something else beyond just like what her other projects are. So Fran, moving on to you. What projects are you excited about? I mean, art or non-art that you would like to promote?
I'm actually involved with 2 projects right now, not really art related. One of them is making face masks to donate to a variety of institutions and people that can't afford them. So I also have a GoFundMe campaign going on with that. It's been pretty quiet lately because, election time and everything that's going on. So if you can, please share. I wanna, my goal is to make at least 500 masks. I've already made roughly around 350, a little bit more than that. And I've sent them everywhere from New York to Portland and places in Denver, back in Chile as well. And I've been handing them out to people facing homelessness and, just trying to do something in all this pandemic horrifying times.
Understandable, yeah.
So that's like my main project right now. So I'm pretty much just doing it on my free time. I got a little sewing machine and stuff. And the other one is more related to kind of like self-defense. We're trying to create with some other women, we're trying to create a sort of do it yourself, do it at home type of protective cover so that you can be safe from, all forms of discrimination. Either, we hear all the time about people getting attacked over their religion or sexual orientation, their skin color, gender identity, all these things. Is just, it's a very scary world right now, and we're just trying to create something that is accessible to everyone, particularly minorities for obvious reasons. And yeah, so we haven't really announced it yet, but that's another thing that I've been working on. So keep him busy as well.
That's good. And to kind of end this conversation on a note that, I mean, as it would end on, so there was a company back in 1975 called the Bicycle Company. The Bicycle Company produced several different artists, but in 1989, an album came out that I enjoy the hell out of, and this is a spoiler because I was going to actually write a blog about this, about what my favorite album by a band started by Trent Reznor initially, and several other artists who were a mix of like studio musicians for like Depeche Mode. They were a mix of other folks who worked in the studio in Chicago. Oh no, our internet. How's the internet going?
Really laggy, and I can't hear you.
Okay. God, I was just about to nerd out. How are we doing now?
I too could not hear you.
Okay. Was it just because I was like talking too much about what I was about to get to? Long story long story short, Trent Reznor and several different artists back in the 80s, late 80s, released an album called Pretty Hate Machine. And the band was called Nine Inch Nails. Nine Inch Nails has been fairly active throughout this pandemic and throughout pretty much most of the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, the teens. When Trent and Atticus have been active with like film soundtracks as well. The reason that I actually know Fran is because of the fact that we attended a Red Rock show one day apart from each other. And she got to go to the cooler night, which was the night that The Perfect Drug played. And I was just like, I'm still friggin' jealous because you sent me the video and it's just like, God damn it. Like, I mean, I got to hear I'm Afraid of Americans, which is a great like Bowie, like Trent collab. But, you know, so the question that I'm posing to you, Fran, is what is your favorite Nine Inch Nails album?
That is a really hard question. I think I'm torn between the two first albums, so Pretty Hate Machine and The Downward Spiral. I'm torn because there's many songs on both albums that I love mainly because I can relate to them, and I like it's those songs that you just sing along. And for me, the experience at Red Rocks was magical because I had Nine Inch Nails. I think they've been in Chile a couple of times, but I was too small to go to concerts. So the fact that they came to play here, I was like, I've got to go. Like, this is, who knows how much longer they're going to be together. It's a pretty old band. I need to see them at least once and I can die in peace.
Yeah, I forget if I told you my story behind seeing it, and I'll rope Izzy and like Marcus into this because I really want to talk about music a little bit.
Yeah.
If you guys are cool with that, thumbs up. If thumbs down, if like you have to go. Marcus, I didn't see a thumb. Are you good? Marcus, you want to talk about music?
I do have to go soon. Yeah.
Okay, understandable, Marcus. But are there any bands that you like really quickly so that we can, you know, just speed run favorite bands right now?
I couldn't even tell you, man.
Gorillas, come on, I'm helping you.
Gorillas, but I haven't heard that new album, you know?
Dude, you gotta listen to it.
I know.
I haven't heard it either.
It's so good. I've listened to it like 3 or 4 times. Like, Jesus. Okay, Izzy's in my boat. But yeah. All right, so Marcus, thank you for you know, taking your time, almost 2 hours out of your day, or night rather, because it's dark here in Denver, to speak with us. Have a fantastic rest of your evening. Yeah, dude, listen to the new Gorillaz album.
I will. Thank you.
Okay,
I
mean, I feel bad bullying you, but like I'm gonna like text you an image of the features on it. Okay. I'm just gonna say like Beck is on it, and Elton John, and Robert Smith of The Cure. So it's a pretty like stacked album. So
that's Sir Elton John.
Oh, my apology. Well, my apologies. And someone compared me to Elton John because I got these like new like purple glasses recently, and I was just so honored. But yeah, Izzy, you were like just thumbsing up and like clapping in the background when I was talking about that album. But are there any other albums that you are like listening to like in quarantine that you've just like gone bonzo about?
So I'm not the type of person who goes through an album specifically. I go through artists, and usually like I'll just like loop play one song at a time, and just like nerd out on like that one song and then move on to the next. So I guess I study genres more. But I've been a big fan of Budgie for a long time. They're a groove metal band from the late 60s, early 70s. I've been vibing on Rez lately, who's a Colorado native. Or not a native, excuse me. She's not Native American, but like she's from Colorado.
Okay, and she isn't a chorus beer either, too, right? I just want to double check.
Again?
I was just making a joke. Colorado Native is a brand of chorus beer that's only available in Colorado.
I didn't know that.
It's as good as what you would imagine chorus would be like in Colorado. I don't want to talk too much about beer politics, but I mean, fuck course. But
I understand. I've been listening to a lot more Gojira lately. I've been listening to an indie synth band from Canada called Tupperware Remix Party a lot too, because they make me super happy, and a lot of their songs have messages of like, they literally have a song called Believe in Yourself, or Believe in Your Dreams, excuse me, and like it's just really happy, upbeat funk synth. Yeah, so I guess I'm like kind of a little everywhere with what I've been listening to lately.
okay. Well, it sounds we need to like make a gigantic group Spotify playlist if you guys are cool with that and you have Spotify. But
Yep.
I'm going to end the conversation on this
1,000.
because unfortunately I actually have to head out or quote unquote head out, aka I got to record the roll to the polls thing that happened earlier today because the dude still hasn't sent me the stuff. And this is going to get cut out because like this, I mean, we already did we did the part where we all talked about our projects and stuff like that. And you know my project, obviously, but I went to the Red Rocks show because I volunteered for a group called the Friends of Red Rocks, which are a trail building group that have built various different trails around Red Rocks Park and a couple other like areas that are in the Morrison area. This is going to make you guys laugh a lot, but you have both heard of Kids Bop, right?
Yeah.
So kids,
I have
because
3 siblings.
so Kids Bop
We're-
was doing a concert at Red Rocks, and I was just like, I'm not going to get Nine Inch Nails. Everyone's going to sign up for this. Oh, and okay, the context. After you volunteer for enough shifts trail building, you get to volunteer for education shifts. And education shifts are talking to people about Friends of Red Rocks and the mission and like, how we should be preserving this land for generations in the parking lot of a concert so that you get more people that are involved in that organization. After like talking to those people about those conversations, you're at Red Rocks and like the volunteer booth is actually inside of the concert venue. And the volunteers just tell you, oh, hey, you're inside Red Rocks, and you've already talked to all these fans. So there's a band playing over there on the stage, and you're here, so you should see them for free. Yeah. So I actually was about to sign up to see Kid Spot for free because I didn't think I was going to get to see Nine Inch Nails. But I thought to myself, like, one of the first concerts, or the first concert that I saw Nine Inch Nails was the tour that they did kind of in support of Hesitation Marks with Chris Cornell and Soundgarden as the other band, because both like the thematic things were the fact that like Super Unknown and the Downward Spiral were released the same year in 1994. So basically, I was just like, this is going to be a great show just out of virtue of the fact that I enjoyed the show that I saw before. So even if I don't get it and I, am just stuck at home, whatever night that was, 2 or 3 years ago, I should try and like apply for it. So I'm out hiking with a friend on a weekend, and we stop at a gas station, and I get signal like surprisingly in the middle of the mountains. I get an email from like the coordinator at Friends of Red Rocks saying, so we actually found a volunteer spot for you at this Nine Inch Nails show, and we need you to come next week. But I had a shift at the art museum that was a 7 to 3. And I would have had to been at the venue at 4:30. As someone that doesn't have a car, that's really tough for me. So I took a couple of buses. I took I can't remember the exact line, but it's a line that runs fairly close to a station out in Jefferson County that you can take an Uber to get to Morrison, and it'll throw you back $15 or $20. But I'm just thinking to myself, that was a $15 or $20 Nine Inch Nails concert. And I mean,
Oh.
Fran can attest to it because she was there night 2, and I've seen some video of night 2 or not that night 1. I don't know. But yeah, I liked the 2014 concert with Soundgarden. Jesus Mary Chain was a decent opener, but like they kind of got cut short by the rain that happened. And there was a local opener too that got completely shoved off the schedule, but Trent like mentioned them like in the middle of like the set, and was like, yeah, the rain kind of got these guys screwed over. Which, I mean, to me, like Trent is kind of a, God, I'm nerding out. Trent is like someone that I really like because he promotes art, like small artists and like people that aren't necessarily like, you know, I don't know. It's not like Bono talking about like Kendrick Lamar or something like that, which isn't bad, but you know, that it was a spiritual experience for me in a lot of ways because I mean, I was at a place where I was sort of 1 foot out of the museum, like mentally, and I got a lot of clarification out of that show. I mean, just beyond like the fact that I think it was you know, Jeff Keane that mentioned that like you had seen that show, Fran, and I think that I gave me your personal email and we like started nerding out about that shit. And yeah, I mean now it's just an honor to out of the 3 of us on this call, like you are probably the biggest Nine Inch Nails fan out of all of us, just because you've seen the most shows. You introduced me to How to Destroy Angels, actually, and like you know, also Mari. Well, and then I in turn introduced you to Mari Queen's like pre Trent Reznor career, which the band is okay. Mari Queen's voice though is just fantastic, but. To end on this, because I actually really have to get going, I I hope that this conversation that we have, just with all the artists that we've thrown out, with all the like things that we've promoted, has really contributed to the discussion about like equity and like building like community in things like cycling advocacy, in things like the art world, and the mutual aid that we need during these really tough times where we're facing a presidential election where I mean I'm working you know thankfully I'm not working the first 3 days, but I mean I've bought an you probably understand this from the world of protests, but I bought an umbrella, a full-size umbrella. I have water because milk of magnesia actually makes, you know, tear gas worse. Uh, I am debating actually going to a location on South Broadway to get a very light Kevlar that, you know, I could wear on my bike conceivably. And because of the fact I had a press conference this morning where my bike is now one of the more well-known bikes in the city of Denver, I'm even debating getting a second bike. So I'm in the market for a bike, guys. If you guys have anything or see, oh, Izzy, unmute.
I do. I know someone who actually like today posted on Instagram saying, I got this bike from a bad person. I don't know if they stole it or if someone, you know, is looking for a bike or whatever, but I'm not looking for any money for it.
Okay.
If
I'll still pay
you
for it.
know
Go
whose
ahead.
bike this is, like, you know, let me know. But also, if you need a bike,
I need
free
a bike for
charge, just pick it up.
I need a bike for security reasons. If you
I'll
could
get you in contact with him.
if you can get me in contact with that person, that'd be great. How tall are they? Because it's a situation where like I can't like ride like a little like you know, a tricycle basically.
Well, it's actually, you know the person. It's Nick.
Oh my god, okay. Oh my god, it's Nick. But Nick and I are just a little point of reference. Nick also worked at the Denver Art Museum and as a gallery host. He is on Instagram as Feigned Hands, and Nick actually, I believe, lives in Capitol Hill, which is a neighborhood that is fairly close to downtown and fairly close to like what the center of gravity is going to be for a lot of the things that are going to happen in the next 2 or 3 days.
I'm worried about him.
And I'm worried
really
about
worried
Nick
about
too.
him.
I'm worried about Nick too. But He's one of the most lovely human beings on the planet. And on the note that Nick is a great human being, on the note that I found a bicycle for free, and on the note that, you know, Nine Inch Nails is one of the most magical things on the planet, I hope that everyone watching this stream, if I decide to add this part, has a fantastic night, and take care. Bye.
You too, dude. Thanks.
Nice
See ya.
meeting you.
All right, have a good one. Oh,
Nice to meet
Fran,
you
by the way, my mom wants a signed copy of the poster. Can you digitally sign it?
I can digitally sign it, yes.
Okay, and then I'll just email it to my mom because my
awesome.
mom really wants your poster.
Aww, that's
That's
so
Okay.
sweet. Thank
Cool.
you.
Well, have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good
Bye.
night.
Bye.
Bye.